Good evening. In London, it's 5:35. Is evening? I think it's after 6 is evening. It's afternoon, isn't it? I forget, yeah. But my name is Mohammed Ahmedullah. I'm the Secretary of Brooklyn Circle. Normally, I give a few minutes talk, about Brooklyn Circle and about Bengal History Week. But I've been really unwell from last night, so I won't be able to do that. And I will straight away pass on to Ashraf, and I will let people in, and I will sort of help him out during his chairing session. Thank you, Ashraf.
Thank you, Mohammed Bhai. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Thank you all for coming. I'm thrilled to be told by Mohammed Bhai there's a lot of interest in this event today. So I'm sure it's going to be a very memorable evening. My name is Ashraf Hoque. I'm a social anthropologist and I'm based at UCL. And I'm going to be your chair for tonight's event. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Nabanipa Bhattacharjee as our guest speaker tonight. Dr. Bhattacharjee is Professor of Sociology at Sri Venkateswara College, University of Delhi. She's been teaching at the institution since 1999 and has been involved in research and related activities in India and abroad, and publishes widely in both academic and the popular press. Her research interests include historical and political sociology, the partition of South Asia, migration and identity, anthropology of violence, and Northeast Indian societies and cultures. Now, just before I hand over to Professor Bhattacharjee, I just want to provide a quick breakdown for tonight's proceedings. Professor Bhattacharjee will speak for about 30 to 45 minutes, after which there will be an opportunity to ask questions and provide any comments. You are very much welcome to ask a question or comment directly by raising your virtual hand, or alternatively, you can also type your question into the chat box, which I think is active at any point, and I'll read it out to the speaker on your behalf. So without further ado, it's with great pleasure that I now invite Professor Bhattacharjee to present her paper entitled Growing Up Bengali Bangladeshi in Northeast India. Professor Bhattacharjee, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohammed Ahmedullah, Ashraf, Laili, and of course, Junaid Chaudhary, who actually, introduced me to Sylhet in a solid sense, and then Bangladesh and its entire question. So I benefited tremendously from Junaid Chaudhary during my PhD work, which was, of course, 11 years ago. Now, and of course, thanks to Brick Lane Circle and the Bengal History Week, as I could be part of this program. Now, I'll speak for about, as Ashraf said, 30 to 45 minutes. Now, of course, I would have to cut down quite a bit. I thought it would be more. I would get a little more time, but that's okay. So this is called Growing Up Bengali Bangladeshi in Northeast India. And Bengali and Bangladeshi, as many of you may know, is interchangeably used, in the popular press, in the popular, in conversations, in the public domain in Northeast India. In fact, entire India, particularly those who come from the Northeast, Bengali-speaking people, they are often called Bangladeshis. So, and I can, since I grew up in that part of the world, so I can give you n number of, examples where I have been called a Bangladeshi because my place of birth happened to be, Shillong, which is in Northeast India. So, and therefore I would have to produce a domicile certificate and so on and so forth. So that's how it is. Also because this is a political question, being a Bengali and a Bangladeshi. So what I would like to do is talk about this group of Bengalis who are lodged outside Bengal. So what I'll do is, it's divided into two basic parts because it's meant for the general audience. So I've deliberately cut down on, the theoretical stuff. So run you through two phases. First is, the historical process, which, all Bengalis of Northeast India, have to factor in because they grow up with that that history. And the other is, of course, my personal growing up in a place called Shillong, which is the capital of the state of Meghalaya, which was created in 1972. Now, there are 6 watershed moments, as you know. I made a brief note and I sent to Ashraf. I locate the Bengali question, and growing up as a Bengali within the frame of 6 watershed moments in the history of Assam, right? The first is, of course, and these moments are to be factored in if we really have to get a historical sense of, growing up as a Bengali. And that is where also the genesis of what I have called the hate discourse. Now, very quickly, I want to tell you that, I have thought a lot about using the term hate, right? And whether I should call this discourse the anti-Bengali / Bangladeshi, including Hindus and Muslims, right? As hate discourse. But for the want of a more appropriate expression, I stuck to that. But of course, it could be, an intolerance discourse, right? We can use, it's milder, right? Intolerance discourse, hostility, repulsion, revulsion, aversion, abhorrence, and so on, the list goes on. So, and what is the genesis of that discourse? Now, the first bit is, of course, we go to the annexation of Assam, and I'll run you through that bit now, and the annexation of Assam by the British in 1826. In 1832 and in 1826, as we all know, many of us would know at least, that the Treaty of Yandabu was signed, and Assam, became part of the Ahom Kingdom, lost, became part of the British Empire. In 1832, Kachar, another region, which was also a kingdom, and which was heavily influenced by Bengal, let's say. That's also a very controversial question, but influenced by Bengal. These were all officially incorporated into the Bengal presidency. Now, what happened between 1826, 1832, and 1874? Now, these temporal moments are very important. When I was growing up, I, of course, did not know about all that. But as I started exploring, and I realized that these temporal moments have actually defined, our growing up. So between 1826 and 1874, a couple of things, happened, of which 2 are very important. One is, of course, introduction of Bengali as the medium of instruction in schools, etc., as the official language of Assam. In 1838, it was introduced, and until 1873, Bengali was to be used for all administrative purposes in Assam. Needless to say, because Assam became part of the Bengal presidency, Bengalis in large number were recruited. They ran the administration of Assam, and they settled down eventually in Assam. The second important thing that happened between these 2 phases was also the gradual emergence of the Assamese middle class. Of course, aided by the missionaries, with the support of the missionaries, and of course, the Calcutta trained, Assamese, would actually start articulating this whole identity of, Assamese identity, and therefore pitch it vis-a-vis the other identity, which was, of course, the Bengali identity and the dominance of Bengalis in Assam. The next important moment is 1874, and this is creation of Assam as a chief commissioner's province. Now, this is critical, absolutely critical, I think, to understand the Bengali question. And that is because it included, in 1874, Assam was not just Assam, but it included 3 Bengali-speaking districts. One was Sylhet, the other was Kachar, Bengali influenced, and Gwalpara, right? And other hill districts. So Assam became a chief commissioner's province. And it was, of course, welcomed. The move was welcomed. But by including Sylhet in particular, and Kachar and Gwalpara and others, but Sylhet in particular, this was resisted both by the Assamese, the rising Assamese intelligentsia, middle class, as well as the Sylhetis. Now, this is very interesting and important because we see the resistance of the Bengalis of Sylhet, about their stay in Assam. And the Sylhet Bengal Reunion League was formed, which ceaselessly campaigned for reunification of Bengal. And, if you read the documents, they are, of course, not very, they did not have nice things to say about Assam, obviously. And they consistently, campaigned to move. But that did not happen. Now, there is one point that I argue here, and that is that 1874 was a very important moment, but somehow I personally call it the first partition of Bengal. Much before 1905, these districts had actually, Bengal was reorganized and these districts had gone to Assam, but it's generally not included, in any of the partition literature and so on. Now, so these attempt to reunite with Bengal, of course, failed. The third important temporal moment is not exactly any definite year, but late 19th century, when we see the movement of predominantly Muslim peasantry from Eastern Bengal. And the movement begins actually by the late 19th century and gathers momentum by the early decades of the 20th century. So these two, 1874 and late 19th century, Bengali Hindus and Muslims, but Muslims not from Sylhet here, but from other parts, gradually moved to Assam. By 1920, and this is very interesting because by that time Muslim League was already established, we see that by 1920s, this Sylhet, in Sylhet, the question of reuniting with Bengal was actually dying down. And Sylheti Muslims now wanted to stay on in Assam while Hindus still wanted to reunite with Bengal. So I can go into details, but let's just leave it at that. So this is very important. Now, 1920s, there is another important thing that happens, and that is also the introduction of the line system in Assam. So we see resistance to the incoming Muslim peasantry, primarily from Mymensingh district. And this is all well known, it's all written about a lot, everybody knows, but just to run you through the time. So we see this resistance building up. By 1947, of course, the views of, people of Sylhet were sharply divided along, of course, communal lines, and the Sylhet referendum happened, as we all know. Now, the Sylhet referendum was held on 6th and 7th July, 1947. And the result of the referendum, of course, went in favor of Sylhet uniting and moving, becoming part of East Pakistan. So, but a boundary was drawn and part of Sylhet was retained by Assam. So Karimganj, part of Karimganj subdivision, remained in India along with a few thanas. And that eventually was incorporated and turned into, was included in Kachar district. Now, Kachar was a Hindu majority district, so that did not go through a referendum, though there were demands also by the Muslim League, but a lot of issues here, eventually it did not go. Now, what we see here in the Sylhet referendum case is also heavy refugee movement to Assam. And I'm only talking about this part of, the country. I'm not talking about West Bengal at all. We see heavy refugee movement, a lot of work now being done on refugee movements in Kachar. And, but of course, with Sylhet gone, Assam and a section of the Assamese middle class and the Assam Congress in particular, they heaved a sigh, there was a relief, that finally Sylhet was gone, which meant that Bengalis were gone. But the sad part was that a portion of Sylhet was retained in India. So Karimganj remained in India and Kachar was heavily anyway influenced by Bengal. So, and Bengali. So migrants also moved to Kachar. So Kachar became actually the site of the new space where Bengalis found a home, particularly Bengali Hindus, and the Muslims who remained, Sylheti Muslims who remained, they remained anyway, mainly in the Karimganj region, Badarpur and Karimganj region. So this is another important watershed moment. There is also just a point that I wish to make, and I think it's a theoretically important point, and very quickly, and that is, when I started researching Sylhet and reading on Sylhet and all of that, nowhere I would come across, this entire process of referendum, etc., being called Partition of Assam. But technically it was Partition of Assam, right? Because a portion was taken out of Assam. So I felt, and I wrote about it in a Bengali article published by Gangchil, again about 6 to 7 years ago, where I deliberately call this Partition of Assam. So, but I cannot think of anyone until I came along to call this Partition of Assam, including scholars like Sanjeev Barua, whom I know very well, and I have interacted at length. And that is because Sylhet's case was sad, because Sylhet was neither claimed by Assam nor by Bengal. So it was a Bengali speaking district outside Bengal, and it was a non-Assamese district in Assam. So if you kind of just look at the complexity, so it kind of remained unclaimed. And this is something that the Sylhetis continue to carry forth, this sadness, this trauma, and so on. In any case, so we see 1947, it happens, refugee movement begins, but right thereafter, we see, small scale, low intensity riots, etc., campaigns against Bengalis, taking place all over Assam, and which is generally known as the Bangal Kheda, movement. Finally, we see 1960-61, which is again another watershed moment, so far as being a Bengali is concerned, and that is very, very important. Again, a very underworked area is the language riots, which rocked Assam in 1960-61. And in 1961, and this was against the imposition of Assamese as the official language of Assam. And it was resisted by Kachar and Karimganj and Hailakandi, 3 districts, Bengali speaking, with Bengali majority districts in South Assam. So this was resisted, and eventually 11 people were shot dead on 19th May in 1961 in Silchar. This is, I think, after, so this is in Bangla, the Bhasha Andolon, as it is called. So after Bangladesh, which is the whole Matri Bhasha, Dibosh, etc., I think 19th May becomes another very important signpost, to understand the Bengali identity construction and, in northeastern India. So 1960-61 in Silchar. The next, and this is the last one in the first part of my lecture, and which is the temporal moments, as I have said, is the Bangladesh War of 1971. Because I think Bangladesh War changed the entire, politics of northeastern region. It was, things were already there, but Bangladesh War kind of triggered everything afresh. And this was, of course, one, the creation of Bangladesh, which was, of course, it broke away from Pakistan and was established as a secular, country and so on. But for northeastern India, the issue had nothing to do. Nobody was bothered about whether it was a secular country, no, the politics, no, nothing. It was just the refugee movement. And as we all know that we see again, heavy refugee movement following the Bangladesh war. So influx in Assam. And that's when the whole, so if you look at the Assam movement, which takes off in 1979, and if you look at the cutoff year, I've those of you who are familiar with the NRC, National Register of Citizens debate and the Citizenship Amendment Act that India has passed and all that, the whole issue is about the cutoff year. So anyone who has come after 1971, and there is a particular date, is a Bangladeshi. So, so Bangladeshi is a hate word. Bangladeshi is a gali. Let me put it in Hindi because, you know, it's, yeah, so it's an abuse. So, you know, and as many of us, I don't know, those of you, you know, here from Northeast would know that as late as 2020, October, we see, you know, posters in Shillong saying that all Bengalis are Bangladeshis. And I sometimes wondered, you know, why Bangladesh does not protest. You know, Bangladesh should officially protest and say that you cannot use the name of a country, you know, as a form of abuse. And so you just have to, you know, corner whether it's a Hindu or a Muslim. It is Bangladeshi. So I think Bangladesh war changed the, you know, the color, the politics and the culture, everything of Northeastern of region. 1971 is also important. 71, 72 is also because we also see the launch of the Hill States movement in Northeastern India, which would actually go on to completely see Northeast completely reorganized in creation of all the states. Like, you know, eventually, first Meghalaya in 1972, Nagaland was already created. So, and we see the conscious, you know, use of identity politics for the first time, you know, so to say, but also by tribal groups, right? And so Meghalaya gets created in 1972, and this is the second part of the lecture where I am personally involved because this is the place that I have lived and I have, you know, grown up. And also this is the year of my birth. So this is very interesting that, that, you know, everything starts with 1972 when Meghalaya was carved out of Assam and established, you know, a separate state was created. Now, in order to understand the tribal, you know, reaction to Bengalis and also others, because it's also the tribal versus non-tribal politics, which shaped the post-1972, you know, public discourse in Meghalaya. But, and of course, there are other non-tribals like the Marwaris, for instance, the Biharis, for instance, other people from, you know, other parts of India. So there is a hierarchy of, you know, constructing the other. And of course, the Bengali, you know, tops the list. So, right. So what happened was 6 schedule provisions. 6 schedule is the provision of the Indian Constitution. And that was extended now to the entire state. 6th schedule was basically meant for tribal groups living in predominantly non-tribal states to safeguard their interests, identity, and so on and so forth, with local, you know, councils and so on. But this was extended to entire Meghalaya, except for a tiny part, you know, comprising 3 localities called the European Ward. It was like, it was, you know, part of the, it was implemented in the entire state. The second important factor, and which is related to my personal growing up, is the launch of the Assam Movement in 1979. You know, most brutal, ghastly, you know, experience we see, kind of culminating in the Nelly massacre, which is again not talked about, you know, at all, where you know, a large number of Muslims, I mean Bengalis were, you know, killed in Assam. But the Assam movement, and I was reading today, you know, before this lecture, I was looking at some, you know, primary data I have, you know, the memoranda submitted in 1979 to the Deputy Commissioner and others. My father was personally involved, so I have access to those documents. And we see, you know, the Assam Gana Parishad, which was called Assam Gana Sangram Parishad then, would come to campaign in Shillong. And of course, this was all targeted against the non-tribal outsiders in Meghalaya. So, and this was, you know, an anti-foreigner movement, an anti-outsider, anti-foreigner movement, because Bengalis were Bangladeshis, right? And they were not totally incorrect, because after all, our origins were Bangladeshi, right? But technically we were not Bangladeshis, but that's how, you know, this was done. You know, Bengalis were targeted. First in 1979, I have memories of that, quite vivid, in fact, you know, no schools, no nothing, killings and so on and so forth. So this went on. The interesting part is that, okay, so the interesting part is that, sorry. Yeah, so the interesting part is that 1979, we see arrests, but no conviction of the perpetrators. After a while, so, you know, the prayer and petition mode, we see non-tribals, you know, appealing to state authorities and so on, but nothing much really happened. But this is also not a final part. I'm still working on this. So whatever data I have, I've just you know, speaking, but more definitely needs to be done and, you know, explored. In 1987, you know, a fresh kind of, you know, spate of riots, you know, happened. This were again directed against the non-tribals, but mainly the Nepali residents, right, of Shillong, of Meghalaya in general. And finally, in 1992. Now, what is interesting is that for 1987 and 1979, no commission of inquiry was set up, right? But for 1987 and 1992, 2 inquiry commissions were set up. Now, what is interesting is that the 1987 committee was headed by a judge called Justice Manisana. Now, that report was never presented in the Meghalaya Legislative Assembly, and till date, the inquiry was conducted, but no one has access to that particular document, right? I have tried, but we don't have the report. We don't have the report. The report that we have is of 1992, which is the Justice Sharma Commission report. And that is about the 1992 riots. And these are all against, you know, non-tribals in general, including the Biharis and so on. And the Bengalis are anyway a constant presence. You know, they are, you know, as you know, they remain, you know, targets, even in 1992. The 1992 report, Sharma Commission report, is a good report, but I'm afraid I hardly know. But as I said, this is a work in progress. So about the kind of convictions that happened based on that report and so on. Finally, Ashraf, do I have time or? Ashraf?
Might have just popped out.
Yes, you have time. Sorry, my computer.
Okay, I have another 5 to 10 minutes, I think. Yeah. So, right. Now, yeah. So, and then eventually, so this has been going on, you know, and with the NRC and then the CAB, things actually kind of, worsened. So there are periods of lull, but again, these are low intensity kind of, violence, which has, rocked that city for the last 40 years or so. So what has happened as a result was that a large section of the upper middle class, educated middle class, people like, my family, so we all eventually moved out of that city, and we never went back because we were discouraged from going back by our families and so on. I'm only stating what happened. We can talk about this and, can we just go on? We left, but not fully, of course. I keep going back anyway. And as I said that, in 2021, 2020, posters, because there was a demand for the inner line permit, and because of the CAB issue and inner line permit. So we see again posters all over, central Shillong, again, all Bengalis are Bangladeshis, they don't belong here, go back and so on. And these posters, again, I think many of us who are from Shillong, we have, seen such posters for years, not now, but, in the 80s and 90s, go back foreigners and so on, go back Dakars who are. So now in all of this, of course, it's the issue has been, cultural and it's an identity politics and so on. In all of this, there's something which again needs to be, I think, explored is also the role of the church. And this is again, I have not explored yet, but role of religion. So is this conflict just ethnic conflict without any kind of religious overtone? That is something that I also plan to look at. So in the process, as I have said, growing up as a Bengali in northeastern India, it is, I think, the politics of northeastern India is dominated even today for the last 150 years, by this single issue, and that is immigration, and of course the Bengali issue, as I say, and I am mincing no words here. This is the truth. This is the truth. This has been, and that's because also for various other reasons. For instance, economic underdevelopment of the region is one factor why this has been the kind of emerged as the only issue, which has dominated the political discourse. But that is how. So Bengali, therefore, becomes the metaphor of otherness in northeastern India. So wherever you go, whether it is Manipur, whether it is Arunachal Pradesh, any state, this is the main issue. Now, so that is it. So I've been thinking, reading on, works by Zygmunt Bauman, as some of you may know, or Agamben, in fact, and how do you locate, and how do you situate yourself being a Bengali, whether Hindus or Muslims, in the Northeast, is maybe, these writings of these scholars can help us make some sense, and how do you live with this feeling of being an outcast? So finally, I'd just like to say that the kind of work that I'm currently engaged in is try to understand, in the context of Meghalaya and Shillong in particular, about that, all of this has happened, the conflict has happened, major riots have happened, but what now? What do we do? And I'm thinking of, anthropology of, ethics, for instance, anthropology of peace and solidarity and so on. That, can we find some ways of, being together, of living together? So what could be the, strategies that we could adopt, including, maybe, rethinking or, bringing back what is called, what always, Shillong boasted of, and that was cosmopolitanism. So can cosmopolitanism become another model, of trying to deal with, this kind of a scenario where there is so much of mistrust? And I'll give you just one example, personal example, and then just wind up. A couple of days ago, a month ago, there's a gentleman called Avnar Pariat in Shillong, and he started this group called New Dawn, which is, they are into, political awareness and so on. So, and they put out an ad kind of a thing, and I just wrote my name, Google form, and I sent it to him. So, and Avnar called me. So, I said hello and all that. So, and I kept on thinking whether I should tell him that are non-tribals allowed to be part of this group? Of course, my name is, giveaway. You would know that I am not, an indigenous in the sense of Khasi or a Jaintia. But I wanted, but I couldn't ask him that. So you know what I said, and I felt so bad after I said that, and I kept thinking, and I told him that, you can trust me, and I'm a good person. And I want to be part of this initiative, and because so after having been born in that place, I'm 49 years old, and just 1 month ago I had to tell this, that I'm a good person. I don't think I've ever said this to anybody, that you can trust me. And he said, no, of course. He said, no, that's not and I kept on thinking, why did I have to say that? But because of this years of, mistrust and, going away, leaving that place. So I want that we have to, some kind of work which will look at these possibilities of, going back with trust and this idea, and that recognition. So only then I think this process of growing up a Bengali will be, will have some meaning finally. So thank you.
Thank you, Nipapa. Very fascinating talk. We've got about 45 minutes now for question and answers, any comments that people want to have. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll come to you as soon as I can, or write in the box. There's been some lively chat actually in the box while Nipapa was talking. Question from Marito. I'm going to ask there's a lively chat and people, there was a to and fro, but maybe I should ask the original question posed, which is, in the referendum, didn't Maulivazar vote for remain in Assam or as part of India? And since Kachar was a kingdom and not directly administered by the British Raj, there was no referendum like other kingdoms, which were then absorbed into, without choice, into either India or Pakistan. And then I think there's a comment, linguistically, it's today called the Selective language due to geographic politics, but it could have equally been called Kachari language. So if you could just respond to that.
This is a comment. Didn't Maulvi vote to remain in Assam or as part of India? No, we know about Sylhet voting for And what is, sorry, I don't, and since Kachar was a kingdom and not directly, no, Kachar was not a kingdom in 1947. Marie.
Marie, do you want to ask your question directly?
Yeah.
Still with us?
I think she's talking about the princely states, and that happened much later.
Yes, I think somebody commented, somebody
Yeah.
corrected
What
that.
is called Sylheti language?
Okay, so then the final comment from Marie was, so at the time of the referendum, Kachar was still treated as a semi-independent district separate from Sylhet.
Oh, okay, yeah, exactly. Govindra Chandra was killed, yeah. No, there was no referendum in Kachar. Sorry. I may have, yeah, because, I just have to, this is such a long, compressing 200 years is not easy. So,
okay, I think you've answered that.
No referendum took place. Okay, Krishanu, also the Kachar was still the semi, although it was currently part of the Sylheti speaking region. Yes, Marie, it was, but no, because it was a Hindu majority district. So Surma Valley was comprised of Kachar and Sylhet. Sylhet was Muslim majority and Kachar wasn't Muslim majority. So obviously, but these were contiguous adjacent districts, I mean. So, yeah.
We have another question from
Krishanu
Bhattacharjee. In coming
years, are we again? Yeah, there is a new, there's a new interesting development now, and this is a recent one where the signboard in what is now called Barak Valley, Kachar, Karimganj, and Hailakandi. These districts are known by this epithet Barak Valley. Barak is the river. So, so Brahmaputra Valley and Barak Valley, that's what Assam is made up of. And so Barak Valley is Bengali speaking. So, some signboard was, it was kind of defaced because, it was written in Assamese and so on. So a particular public intellectual has called for separation of Barak Valley from Assam and, creation of an independent Bengali speaking state. And now this also has a history, after partition and subsequently been demands for creation of Barak Valley as a union territory. And it shares a border with Sylhet, and Karimganj shares, that is, a border with Sylhet. And but nothing came of this. But Krishanu, we don't know. It's a possibility, definitely. I know groups which are working towards that, and they are interested and they want it that way. So probably, yeah.
Okay, I've got a question from Mohammed Bhai. Do you want to ask it?
Yeah. I read your thesis several years ago. I was really interested in when you discuss about the 1874 partition of Sylhet, when they took Sylhet out of Bengal. And this had a very big impact on the people, right? So can you say a little bit on that? What kind of impact?
Yeah, impact was, Bengalis did not, want to get out of Sylhet, did not want to move out of the Bengal presidency, because Bengal presidency was Bengal presidency. So moving out of Bengal not only meant loss of that affiliation with Bengal, and they were Bengalis. So in fact, what I've argued in my work is that Sylheti identity actually develops, gets constructed from that point onwards. a conscious creation of Sylheti identity. And, we have the formation of something called Srihatto Shommiloni. I don't know if you understand what it means. Sylhet Association, say roughly, that was set up in Calcutta in 1876 by people like Bipin Chandra Pal, very famous Sundari Mohan Das, who's one of the most famous doctors, Sylhet. And they were all based in Calcutta. Maulana Abdul Karim, again, a fascinating figure who studied in Presidency College, Calcutta. And very interestingly, these were all, there was a collaboration of Hindus and Muslims here. And they set up the Srihatto Shommiloni in 1876. I have documents, some documents from that period. And the kind of work they did. And I think I have argued that, these Shommilonis also played a very important role in construction of what came to be I call it distinctly fused identity. The distinct part is the Sylheti part and the fused part is the Bengali part. So at no point, so it's something like, there are two domains, as Partha Chatterjee in another context would argue that there are two domains. There's an outer domain and an inner domain. And the inner domain always remains Sylheti. The core always remains Sylheti, which would include, language, food, everything, music, dance. And in fact, you have to just go to Barak Valley now to see the impact. And so that happens, throughout the colonial period. So 1874 is the most important moment in Sylhet's, in modern Sylhet's history. So I have also argued that how 1874 would actually create someone like a historian called Achyut Charan Tattonidhi, who writes Srihatte Ritibrito. It's the first kind of properly published book on Sylhet's history, to come out. The recognized one, there have been earlier attempts as well. There are other books as well, but this one. And where, Tattonidhi would argue for this distinctiveness of Sylhet. So this distinctly fused identity, because at no point Sylhet could let go of Bengal. To the extent that, I don't know, many of you may be aware that Sylhet was part of the Bengal Congress and not Assam Congress. So that is one reason why in the Assam Assembly, nobody spoke against the referendum, because it was part of Bengal. So it was permanently settled district, unlike Brahmaputra Valley, which was not permanently settled district. Sylhet followed Calcutta University. It was affiliated, all its educational institutions, colleges were affiliated to the University of Calcutta and not to Guwahati University, which of course was established much later, but no. And finally, its jurisdiction, all its legal matters were taken up by the Calcutta High Court and not any other. So in most important matters, Sylhet had this preferential treatment. And Sylhet did not want to be in Assam because these were Bengalis and they did not want. And they thought that they did not want to be tied to a backward district. And this is something that the Bengalis had of Sylhet. They thought that this was a backward region, a backward area, swampy. Who would go to Assam? Nobody would want to go to Assam. So this attitude, so we see repeated appeals to, Lord Northbrook, who was the viceroy, writing and, pleading, begging for reunification with Bengal, and Bengal would keep on refusing. So eventually we have this very interesting citation, I'm not a historian, so a lot of original archives I haven't seen, but I have, if you read Amalendu Guha's book, Planter Raj to Swaraj, which is a very important book to understand Assam and Northeastern India in general. And where he says that, by 1920s, we see the Muslims, Sylhet's Muslims, not wanting to be reunited. And, somebody says that, you keep on crying and saying that, you know, I'm your brother, but your brother from Bengal does not even recognize you as your brother. So, you know, there is also this sense of, being deprived of and ignored by Bengal. So I see Sylheti identity construction, and I argue that there is a very distinct Sylheti identity which exists in Bangladesh even today. We just have to do a better ethnography to actually flesh those things out and find out to understand what this identity is like and how it operates in Bangladesh. In India, definitely. Sorry.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got there's a comment and a question, Nipapa. Comment from, again, Krishanu Bhattacharjee. Again, there is a politics going on since long to separate Sylheti identity from Bengali, and they are getting support from Assamese ultras, which is interesting. And then a question from Marie Tho. There is a large Sylheti-speaking population in the Hoque district of Assam who mass migrated under British rule. What were their motivations?
Okay, when Sylhet, first is Marie, when Sylhet was out of Bengal presidency in 1874, wasn't there already a previous partition of the region if today's Sylhet? No, Marie, Kachar was an independent kingdom. It was independently annexed to the British Empire in 1832. So Sylhet and Kachar were never together. They are adjoining, they're next to each other, you know, regions, right? So they were never together in that sense, but being neighbors, of course. And entire Eastern India was heavily influenced by Bengal because of historical reasons again. So, so we have to keep that in mind. So it was not just Kachar, Assam, Orissa, parts of Bihar, you know, and these were all part of the Bengal presidency, right? So we need to focus again. Okay, Krishanu, again, there is a politics going on since long to separate Sylheti. Yeah. Krishanu, that's what I said. I'm calling it, it's my own coinage. I call it distinctly fused, you know. So there is this very strong Sylheti element, but at the same time, and that Sylhetis would never do, because why would they give up their claims of being tied to the larger Bengali nationality? You know, so there's no such question. So, you know, so yeah, there might be attempts, you know, but as I said, that they're together, but they're together in a very complicated way, you know, and that's the thing that one has to understand, that they're not just together as Bardhaman would be, you know, tied to the Bengali nationality, or Krishnanagar, for instance, or Chandanagar, for instance, you know, districts of Western Bengal, no. So, and we could have these kind of things with also, say, you know, Chittagong, for instance, you know, has a very distinct, but in case of Sylhet, there was this 1874. The rest, all the districts remained part of Eastern Bengal always. You know, so we need to get that part of history, you know, understand it very clearly. There is a large Sylheti-speaking population in Hoque district of Assam who mass migrated under British rule. They migrated to Hoque. I don't know what were their exact motivations, but when I say that, you know, that Brahmaputra Valley is largely, you know, Assamese Maimansingh Muslims, there are also Sylheti Hindus in Brahmaputra Valley, but the concentration is definitely Barak Valley. So Hoque is a pocket, as most of us know, those who work, you know, on that region, on Northeast, we are aware that. But we also know that, you know, Hoque is the place from where Badruddin Ajmal runs his business. You know, the Agor, the incense business. I don't know what were their exact. I am not an expert on Hojai, sorry. Politically, Sylhet and Kachar were separated, but it is a cultural and linguistic area, correct? So I'm asking how political history is interpreting cultural language history in this separation. Sorry, Krishanu, can you just explain this? What exactly you mean?
I think that's Marie.
Is that Marie?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think it's
oh, okay. I don't get this. I'm asking how political history is.
Marie, do you want to come in and speak? Do you want to ask that question directly or rephrase it?
Nope.
No, she sent a message saying she doesn't want to speak because she doesn't want to be recorded.
Right, okay.
All right, I get it. Sorry, I don't get this.
Okay, that's fair. There's a question from...
Is there any role of Abdul Hamid Khan Bhashani? Of course. Of course. But we have a person who knows this much, much better as an expert. So I'm afraid I don't know much, but of course, Bhashani is Bhashani, you know. Of course he had a role to play, absolutely. He's one of the foremost, tallest peasant leaders that South Asia has seen. Let's put it that way, and not really let not India and Bangladesh claim him. Let's call him a South Asian, and so Bhashani, of course. Bhashani was a very interesting man, and as I said, that we have Laili here, and Laili is knows, but of course he had a very important role to play in Northeast India, right? 1930s. I mean, it's all Bhashani. Also, there is just one point I think I missed, and maybe because this is a discussion is going on. Those of us who study Northeastern India and are interested also have to understand that there is, we have to make a distinction between Sylheti-speaking Muslims and non-Sylheti speaking Muslims in Assam, even today. And I have, records, because I have done my field work there. So where this comes out very clearly in every possible way, whether it's in terms of language, in culture, and they generally don't intermarry, and the Sylhetis that I spoke to were absolutely against the idea of marrying, because this is also about, and as students of migration would know, it's also about the time that, the length of stay in a particular place. So for Sylheti Muslims, it was always this thing about lawfully moving to Assam, because Sylhet was included, and Sylhet and 1874. So, and this comes out, in field work. And then there are phrases, and these are very proud Sylheti Muslims that you meet in places like Karimganj and Badarpur, because they still think that they are part of original, that's Sylhet, right? So, and there is no marital alliance with the Brahmaputra Valley Muslims. Generally, no, unless, of course, it's So there are these, very fine kind of, differences and so on. But if you are interested in that region. Okay, any more, Ashraf? No.
So Nipapa, Marie's rephrased her questions. She's got two questions, which I think they're both very interesting. Part one is, when Sylhet was out of the Bengal presidency in 1874, wasn't there already a previous partition of the region if today's Sylhet area was separated from Kachar? So it was a type of rejoining. Was it a type of rejoining? And part two, Okay, and part two is politically Sylhet and Kachar were separated, but it is a cultural and linguistic area. So I'm asking how political history is interpreting culture and language history in this separation. So this is a rupture that I think she's talking about that maybe you can comment on.
So, no, rupture meaning? A rupture where? I mean,
as in there's a continuity. I think from what I can understand, there's a continuity in culture and language between these two regions, but in terms of political history, there isn't. So,
okay, yeah, of course, but that's the reason why we see not only we see heavy migration, to Kachar from Sylhet and joining regions, but number one, Sylhet and Kachar were never politically together, but they comprised of one linguistic zone, cultural zone, let's say, space. They did. But of course, the political history of Kachar and Sylhet has been slightly different, but different only during the referendum part, right? Because in the referendum, Sylhet goes away. So if we think of Sylhet and Kachar as two brothers or two sisters, let's say, and then one goes away. But we have to understand that retention of a part of Sylhet in India was a very, very important decision that Radcliffe and Akbar Haidari and, it happened, right? And apparently it was to have a kind of route to Mizoram. That was the idea, that was the reason which was given and so on. But that's what happened. So yes, but right after partition, of course, Sylhet was lost, major portions, but part of Sylhet remained, and that became part of, that's what has come to be known as Barak Valley. So they are together again in that sense. And it's very interesting. If you, I spoke to, if you read some of these writings on Sylhet referendum published from Bangladesh, I remember this series published on Sylhet referendum in this newspaper called Holiday, published from Dhaka, I think. And, what is very interesting in partition historiography is that both sides, though the Sylhetis who are in India and Sylhetis who are in Bangladesh, they both articulate, they both talk about loss. So the Sylhetis this side talk about loss of the major portion to Pakistan, but the Sylhetis of Bangladesh talk about the loss of that tract of land, the Karimganj region, to India. So if you read the Holiday, the series on Sylhet referendum, you see how both sides. So a lot of people in Sylhet told me, oh, that part should not have gone to India. But Indian Sylhetis would say that at least leave us one part, because the other part has anyway gone to Pakistan. So this is very interesting. If you look at the debates, you can actually, so we can go on and on this. Yeah, Tarun, you have a question?
Yeah, I have not a question, but two comments. One, very simply, in all this narration about Bengal and its partition, even like, for instance, 1874, but actually there are other demographically not minuscule communities which have had quite huge spatial imagination about this place, the hill societies, for instance.
Absolutely.
So like Sylhet, Sylhet is a tribal polity, Jaintia kingdom.
Absolutely.
And which British, in that sense, colonialism, they pushed them into the hills. And pushed them into the hills in favor of valley dwellers who are Bengalis or Sylhetis in that sense. So some of the doubts about the valley dwelling people is not necessarily recent. So like even the Shillong's history, and and this is something which a poet friend of mine, Desmond, writes about, is that idea of cosmopolitanism, which for people non-tribals is a enabling act, is
Absolutely.
If you look at the vernacular writing, for instance, from 1930s onwards in Shillong, Khasi writing, even the history of Shillong, the way they write the history of Shillong, and which actually comes into public prominence when in Constituent Assembly of India, there is a debate between J.J.M. Nichols Roy and Rohini Kumar Chaudhary, where Rohini Kumar Chaudhary wants to take out Shillong from the Khasi, what he calls the tribalistan. So in that sense, cosmopolitanism for Khasi community or Khasis and Jaintiyas or hill community is a kind of a symbol of their loss to the colonial and post-colonial kind of thing. Absolutely. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to turn into an ethno-nationalist narrative, but in Shillong, for instance, there are contentious narratives about what Shillong is. For a Bengali who came here and who had most of the jobs, for instance, is a very different, it's a land of opportunity. But for a Khasi working class or Khasi peasant who is migrating into the city, they see the presence of the plains dwellers. And one of the things in 79 and the 79 narrative, and I think 79 narrative needs to be expanded to include even the people who perpetrated the violence in that sense. What are the stories going about? Which is the house which is burnt? So the story about the famous house burning in Mauprem, for instance, of this Bengali lawyer.
Yes,
there's excitement about burning that house because people think that he's a guy who actually takes over other people's houses by using his legal skills and, by giving loans and those kind of things. So I think there is no good or bad narrative in that sense. It is just that narrative about 79, about ethno-nationalism is a singular narrative, which is usually made by people like us who are non-tribals, who are demographically more numerous than these hill communities. So 79, for instance, if you read or if you talk to people, and even if you read Khasi newspapers about 79, it's a, so, and that's what I'm saying, that it's not a question of merely victim versus perpetrator. It's about a longer history of suspicions, which the hill communities have had about the plains people. It is not something which has arisen just suddenly. And some of that could be also that how Sylhet becomes a Bengali area. I still see Sylhet as a tribal area. If you see Sylhet from the hills, it's a tribal area where Garos and Khasis are the people who are running that area. So how do they get pushed? So, so I think the story is not post-colonial.
It's not straightforward. No, certainly not. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, Tarun. Absolutely. In fact, it's like we don't have that much of time, and but I know that now work is being done. For instance, how partition completely destroyed, and redefined these in the hill communities, for instance, the Jaintiyas, and I know PhD thesis which has just been submitted on the Jaintiyas and impact of partition, and there's all of this, and definitely I completely agree with Tarun. I just have one point to make, Tarun, and all of what you have said is certainly, so if one were to write on Shillong, all of this have to be, for instance, the whole idea of cosmopolitanism, and it's not necessarily an enabling thing so far as these small communities are concerned. But just because we are, say, a large community, we meaning all of us. So suppose a hate crime happens. So how are we to read that? And if it has been happening for, say, for years, or if I know that, that I will never be able to go back, I will not get a job there. Say, for instance, I'm talking about very normal, concerns. So how are we to respond? How are we to handle this? Because this also requires an interpretation. That's all I'm trying to say. So how do we read this?
I totally, like, let's talk about jobs. Jobs is a big thing, which for any non-tribal, it's a big question about, because 80% of the jobs are reserved for the local, local tribals.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Now, 80% and actually non-tribal population is just 16%. Okay.
Yeah.
So, the number of jobs, the, middling jobs and bigger jobs of bureaucracy, if you look at the percentage of non-tribals who ran those jobs, was much more in number than their percentage of population which was here. School teachers, for instance. So, and if one argue, so then, the argument, like, why, I think when we talk about Brahminisms, Brahmins, 4% Brahmins running, 30% of the jobs.
True.
So we challenge that, isn't it? In the same way, local tribal can say that we are 80%, we need 80% jobs.
So we need.
So,
yeah, fine then. Yeah, this is what I wanted to know.
Yeah. So, we need to figure out a way in which privileged communities have to give up their privilege.
Correct.
If we don't challenge our own privilege, and we have, as non-tribals, we have to realize that as Indians, see, we claim our status in Shillong as Indians, not as Shillongites. And India, for instance, for many of the communities in Northeast, did not want to join India. So being Indian does not give you special privilege in that sense. It actually makes you a part of the Indian establishment in this place. So we need to figure out a new forms of solidarity, new forms of belonging. We cannot just refer back to our own privileges of the past.
But what about say lower class Bengalis or non-tribals who live there? Forget people like us. Of course, we've been privileged.
And that's where newer kinds of politics, which, like even, and that's what when I say, hate crimes, there are people within Khasi community or the tribal communities who stand up with against their own nationalism.
Of course they do. Yes, yes.
Yeah, they do. But that is the narrative which is never talked about. So like Ichamati case happens, 300 Khasi people write a letter in Khasi.
Yes, yes, yes.
But no one reads it because people don't read vernacular. The outsiders, non-tribals don't read Khasi. Similarly, about lower class Bengalis, if you look at the newer union movements of last 10 years, which are, the Hawkers Association is a great example of where it's the only multi-ethnic working class organization, which the local nationalists also hate, and which the right wing of the non-tribals also hate. And also, and the newer thing in this whole flux is, and like, that was the third comment I would have made, is that now what happens where Hindu Bengalis and Assamese Hindus have combined under the banner of the saffron.
Yeah.
So that is the third thing,
So.
So it is, so newer forms of solidarity, we should be open to listening.
Absolutely. That's what
and there is actual politics which is happening around that, so that is the thing. So I think,
yes, therefore we need to explore more, look at multiple, as I said, so this is just definitely thank you so much. Absolutely, Tarun, I agree.
Thank you. Mohammed Bhai, do you want to ask your question? There's a couple more on the comments.
Yeah, just a quick one. It's not a question. I'm just want to share something.
Okay.
Now, I don't know about the precise border, right? But from what I've read, the Select was incorporated in the Bengal Sultanate in 1301 by Shamsuddin Firoz Shah, with the help of Shah Jalal. And it was around the same time the Dhaka region was also incorporated under the same Sultanate. So when the British took over Bengal, from Shirazuddaulah. Sylhet was in Bengal. It wasn't outside Bengal, right? So Sylhet has been part of Bengal for at least from 1301, 1302.
Yes, absolutely. So no wonder it was, yeah, they kept writing petitions and submitting, yeah, that they wanted to be reunited with Bengal. Obviously, it was part of Bengal. That's what I'm saying, right?
We've got another question from Kishanuda.
But because it was a tea growing district, Sylhet was a revenue, surplus district at that point. And that's why, that's one reason which is officially given for its inclusion in the Chief Commissioner's province in 1874. Yeah, there's one more.
Another question from Krishnanu Bhattacharjee.
Yeah, Krishanu, one last question. What's the future of partition victim Bengalis in northeastern India? Fend for yourself. I don't know. I can't say. Like yeah.
Tarin
I really
shares
have
some insight.
no answer to this.
Tarin shares insights, some insight from our own family.
Yeah, so there's a comment from Tarin. The partition impact and trauma experienced by Sylhetis who left Assam is not talked about. I know that
by Sylhetis who is not talked. I know that my elder family still recognize themselves as being from India. Sylhetis who left Assam to go where? I am assuming
Bangladesh.
this is Sylhet, to Bangladesh.
Back into Sylhet, I presume, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Or to the UK.
That's
or to
a
the
migration that we don't talk about. I have some data because I had done, as I said, work in Badarpur region. So, which also saw, actually there was a migration of middle class educated Muslims to the other side. So obviously, like it happened, everywhere, it happened in India. We see a movement of muhajirs, to Pakistan. So similarly, the same thing happened in, for instance, Junaid Chaudhury's family. This is one family I know, and that family, they moved to Sylhet. They all lived in Shillong, but they all left. And I think Junaid Chaudhury is a very good example of this. Of course, he doesn't say that he is, recognized himself as being from India, but he is obsessed, I should say, with the idea of Shillong and India. So, to the extent that he never carries his passport when he comes to Sylhet, because he cannot, he's never sure of himself. So he told me that, I don't know, I might just go off to Shillong, so I better not carry my passport. So he travels from Dhaka to Sylhet, but never. So he is one such case, of course. There are many, many such cases, of course. Like Punjab, partition trauma is in a lot of frontier communities. Yes, Marie, of course. Punjab, so much has been written about Punjab. So that's there. And Sindh, for instance, is again a very interesting case. So yes, of course.
Just want to squeeze in Layli. She's got a question as well. Layli, you want to ask you a question?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Nipa, for that talk. I'm actually really sort of trying to sort of tag onto the conversation or the dialogue that you and Tarun have been having around, how to possibly complicate cosmopolitanism, which in some ways appears to be and has always been, and for me, as sort of a middle class project. And he's talking about how do we think about, newer forms of solidarities. I mean, and he mentioned the Street Hawkers Association, which in some ways seems like class-based solidarity. So I guess I'm trying to think about what's new here. What is the Street Hawkers Association doing? But it's actually sort of trying to go back on something else that he was saying, which is around the vernacular, about how much we don't know about what's being said in the vernacular. And this is where I wanted to know what sort of, I guess, what are the sort of the cultural, or what are the representations of the Bengali or the Bangladeshi in sort of Northeast India? Are we seeing new forms other than, I mean, I'm not talking about forms of representations that are emerging from these communities themselves, right? But as to how they're depicted by others. So I'm not talking about mere poetry, but what is the form of representation? How are Bengalis and Bangladeshis represented or appearing in Assam? And what has been the sort of evolution of these representations? Because we see, at least, I mean, with the mere poetry, you can see it as a resistance, right, to some form of representation, to how they're being represented or depicted, whether politically, socially, and culturally. But I'm wondering if we're seeing any change itself from within, from that sort of Assamese sort of communities itself.
No.
So what sense?
Yeah, so no, what I understand is that so representations of the Bangladeshis, so mere poetry, no, can you just
I'm not talking about mere poetry is different, right? Mere poetry sort of emerges from within sort of these Muslims who are of Bengali descent, but I'm talking about other kinds of representations that are emerging of these communities that are outside of these communities, right? And what has there been, what sort of positive representations are we seeing other than the Bangladeshi and the Bengali? As if we think about it, right, the Bengali is
okay. So what you're trying to say is that about communities which are not Bengalis or Bangladeshis.
Yeah. Well, how are the Bengalis being represented otherwise, right? Other than that, okay. Is there an image of them that's there, other than that of being an infiltrator, or other than that of being a termite or whatever? I mean,
no, I get it totally. Sorry, I think there's also there's an audio issue.
No, that's
so yeah, I think so. So so I think see, this is also to do with the history of the Bengalis. Mm-hmm. And there is a kind of, I argued, elsewhere, I wrote something where I said that it's a strange kind of a love-hate relationship that you have, if I may, say. So on the one hand, so infiltrators is one way of, seeing the Bengalis. Mm-hmm. But there's also been tremendous fascination with Bengali culture and, and language and so on, at least, in the 19th century. And even in the 20th century, even now for that matter, right? So there is a kind of, there is also, at one level, there is also some kind of admiration. So there is also this whole envy. See, it's also because the Bengalis have been a very, very privileged community in India. And because of their location and, their history and the colonial encounter. And therefore, one way of looking at the Bengalis has also been this thing about, also imitating the Bengalis. So unconsciously, and I would say this even in the context of tribal societies. And now I can read, these processes. When I grew up, or I saw things I couldn't really figure out, but now. So a very a covert process of Sanskritization, if I may use that term, so there is this whole imitation, but at the same time, there's tremendous, anger and, seeing the Bengali the way they are usually seen as infiltrators, as, as termites, as snakes, and, all kinds of names and so on. So that's there. So this is, I think, how they are. Immediately, I cannot think of any example to suggest that, but it's been there in matters of food, for instance. Food is a very interesting area where there's been a lot of, imitation. So it's not that, but then that is rarely acknowledged, and even if it is acknowledged, see, so identity politics or riots for that matter, these are totally constructed and engineered. So that becomes a completely different issue altogether. But at a general level, definitely there is a lot of there are also some positive ways in which
I guess what I'm thinking of here, really the language of the termite and the cockroach. I mean, whether if we think about, or I mean, just of the infiltrators, really it happens not so much with, I mean, it happens with the emergence of the sort of the migration of the East Bengali Muslim to sort of
Bengali Muslim, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So
but if
I mean,
you
when
look
I'm
at
when I'm speaking about sort of the cultural representations, I'm thinking about the Bengali Muslims here. Have we seen? So I mean, the language. C.S. Mullen is the one who
no,
right?
I don't think anything positive is. I don't think I should say because
sure.
lot of things.
Okay.
For instance, even Sylheti Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
This is the most interesting part. That so far as Brahmaputra Valley Muslims are concerned, and this is all from the field work, primary response which I got. Sylheti Muslims completely, they dislike Brahmaputra Valley Muslims totally. So it's not just the Assamese or the Hindus, Assamese Hindus who would, and that is one reason. So if you look at the politics of Assam, post-independence politics of Assam, Myron Weiner told us long time ago, and something which is happening as I am told, or as Tarun just pointed out, is that there is an initiative to bring the Bengali Hindus and the Assamese Hindus, together. And, this is something Weiner had spoken about in way back in 1977 in Sons of the Soil. So, but otherwise, the other reason why, when I was doing my field work, that was 2010, 8, 9, and, AIUDF, which is, Badruddin Ajmal's, party, as you know, AIUDF hardly had any, cadre base in Barak Valley, because Ajmal was seen as speaking for the Maimansingh Muslims. I mean, the Brahmaputra Valley Muslims, let's say. So that is another reason why, that alliance, proper alliance, those days, things have changed after that. And Krishanu, in fact, will be able to, he knows, he's from that region. That could not happen. So when it comes to being called cockroaches and termites, it's very interesting. And this no one will tell you, because unless you actually do field work, you will never know the rift between Sylheti speaking Muslims and the Maimansingh Muslims. So it's like between the new migrants and the old migrants.
Are these class-based sort of tensions? I mean,
yes, very much. Caste. You're talking about caste, right?
And class. I mean, I'm also wondering if there's distinctions
caste. Also caste.
Yes. Okay. Right.
So I can go on and on, and sure. About how I don't know, phrases would be, I was told that if your bones are not good of good quality, then your marriage can never. So, addi bhalo na hole, bou bhalo hobe na. Means you cannot, you won't get these were told me by Sylheti speaking. Also, there is a rift between Kachari Muslims and Sylheti speaking Muslims. Because Sylheti speaking Muslims don't get married to, it's only within that community. At least that was the case. I have no recent data. So
that's fascinating. Thank you.
I think we have to wrap up. Of course, Ashraf. So this just went on and on.
Papa, thank you so much. I've got my. I mean, I couldn't evoke my own privilege as chair because I've had so many questions.
We'll meet.
Yes, I'm coming to Delhi. I'm going to come.
Please come to Delhi.
We can have a long conversation when I come and see you. But I thank you so much. Marie's got a few more comments. Some of them are a continuation.
Nicely explained by Tarun, of course.
But I'm gonna hand back over to Mohammed Bhai, and I want to thank you very much for a brilliant presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ashraf. Thank you, Laili, all of you.
Yeah, to everybody who asked.
Amrita, yeah, I know. Amrita, Tarun, Krishano. Yeah.
Thank you. Mohammed Bhai, are you still here? Are you still with us? You are. Do you want to come in?
Yeah. No, just want to thank you, Ashraf, for chairing, and Nabanipa for this really interesting presentation and the discussion we had, and also the participation of the participants have been quite good and high quality. I really enjoyed and learned quite a bit. Now, just want to say one thing. I went to turn my heater on. By mistake, I turned the TV off. Did you notice anything? All right. Okay. That's fine. I was thinking what happened. It took me a couple of minutes to get back. Okay. Thank you very much. We still got 2 programs left, right? Yeah, and look at our website and try to join. Thank you very much.
Join this. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Brick Lane.
Okay. Bye.